To the gym earlier, and there was tons of. Yeah.
Mike. Thank you, Mike. Good evening, everyone. This is our first budget hearing with the department after the mayor has sent out his recommended budget of about $624 million. We have with us tonight the chair of management and budget, Councilman Hernandez. We have our majority leader, Marilyn Rossetti. We have our minority leader, hey, Alex Damas, how are you? And as the evening goes along, a lot of the council person are just coming in from work. So please bear with us. And I am going to turn this over to our OMB chair, Councilman Hernandez.
Good evening, everyone. Whoa, that sounds loud. Welcome to tonight's first department budget hearing. And guess who's first? Yay, finance. So today we will have a presentation from the finance department and the Office of Management and Budget and Grants. This meeting will be broadcasting live on HPA-TV's Xfinity Government Channel 96, the Frontier Government Channel 6032. It will also be streamed via HPA-TV.org, the HPA-TV Facebook page, and HPA-TV Apple TV, Amazon TV, and Roku TV apps. It will also be made available on the HPA-TV YouTube channel. So, as Council President mentioned, council members that are here present tonight and a few more may filter in as we go along throughout the night. The first presentation tonight will be the Finance Department, and with you guys, we have tonight our Finance CFO Director, Leanne Rawls. Leanne, may you also present your team so that way we can acknowledge them. Thank you.
Absolutely. So to my far left is John Phillip. It is on. Maybe I should pull it closer. Is this better? Is this better? Okay. All right. To my far left is John Phillip, the city assessor. Next to John is Kateria Varela. She is the deputy tax collector. Might be a new face to some of you, but Nancy Raish cannot be here this evening, so she sent her next in command, and she's a great substitute, by the way. Next to me on my left is Constance Rake. She is the city controller. To my right, Michelle Harrison, the procurement manager. Late, maybe strolling in soon, is the city safety and risk manager, Sarah Lowenthal. And to my far left is my trusty steed, my budget director, Julian Freud. Oh, sorry, to my right. Would you like me to get started? Okay. So thank you, Council President and members of Council, as well as Mayor Aralumpalum, for allowing me to present the finance budget this evening for FY 2026. Again, I'd like to give a special shout out to OMB Chair, Councilman Hernandez, for scheduling my department once again for the first presentation of the budget season. For those of you who don't know me, on TV, all those channels that Councilman listed, my name is Leanne Rawls, and I am the CFO for the City of Hartford. I've been with the city for 19 years now and in various roles throughout that term. I have with me today all of my division heads for the Department of Finance. I would like to take this opportunity as we talk about the Finance Department to thank the full department, all of the staff that work for me. They are absolutely fabulous. No complaints. They are continuously working hard and dedicate all of their time to this department in this wonderful city. Without them, I would not be up here tonight. In my role as CFO, I do have oversight of a second department, the Office of Management, Budget, and Grants. Julian Freud, who heads up that department, will be presenting directly after me this evening. He and his team work really hard to develop that budget book that sits right in front of you today. It takes months and months of hard work and preparation and lots of trial and error to get to where he has it in front of you. So a quick thank you to the budget department and the full staff there. Luckily, both of the departments under me work very closely together, day in and day out. And without both of these teams, you would have no financial activity in front of you at all. So getting to the budget now. The mission of the finance department really doesn't change year over year, and we kind of don't want it to, right? Our mission is to ensure that all of the fiscal integrity of the city by exercising due diligence over the city's assets and resources, and we want to provide timely and accurate reporting. So we do this by creating strong internal controls, and I know you've all heard me mention internal controls a few times in the past, but basically that's what ensures the accuracy of the financial data of the city, and it reduces the potential for any fraud. So we want to keep those strong controls over all of our assets to ensure that we are reporting accurately. Moving on. So this is the org chart for the Department of Finance in totality. A few new things I wanted to point out for the FY26 budget is you'll see right under me as CFO, there is a vacant position for Finance Director, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the presentation. But below that are the 5 divisions that operate in the Finance Department: Accounting and Control, which has 3 subunits underneath it, the Tax Collector, the Tax Assessor, Risk and Safety, Procurement, which also has 4 subunits underneath it, and then my executive assistant. With this budget, it is a total of 51 full-time positions. Of those 51 positions, we have 5 vacancies. Actually, let me take that back. We have 4 vacancies. We in totality have 7 vacancies, but luckily we found out today that one person that we extended an offer to for a position in procurement accepted, and then we have 2 pending acceptances for 2 other positions in procurement. So 3 pending acceptances on our 7 in total vacant positions. And of the 51 employees, there are 45 union members. And if you don't mind, I'll skip through the next few pages as it's the org chart for each of the divisions, so you can read them at your leisure. So I wanted to include this slide, which are the roles and responsibilities for the finance department for each of the individual units, just so that you know what each of these units do on a day-to-day basis. For accounting and control, we're processing all the financial transactions of the city. We're handling most of the reporting. Any other reporting is typically done by the Office of Management, Budget, and Grants. The pre-audit team, which ironically consists of 3 full-time positions, pre-audits and processes over 50,000 invoices annually for the city, for the Board of Ed, for the Parking Authority, and for the Hartford Public Library. And then we process payroll for approximately 1,600 employees, which includes the Hartford Public Library, and then 4,000 pensioners. And we do all of the mandated reporting for the city, the library, and all Board of Ed employees. On the procurement side, we provide purchasing services in compliance with the city's ordinance for procurement. Again, for city, Board of Ed, library, parking authority. We maintain the supplier diversity program. We have all contract compliance for all city contracts for both construction and services. And then we monitor the city's affirmative action plan within those contracts. On the risk management side, we procure all of the insurance policies for the city, and there are a lot of them. We manage all the workers' compensation for the city, both managing claims and working with Corporation Counsel to settle those claims. We look at all contracts and actually requisitions related to CIP to ensure that all of our vendors are maintaining the appropriate insurance to work with the city. And then we have right now a small safety program, but we are working on expanding that safety program to ensure that our employees are following the safest protocols possible so that we can minimize those workers' comp claims. On the tax assessment side, assessing all of the real property so that we have the appropriate tax figures throughout the city. He being John, has to produce the city's grand list by the end of January every year, and we meet that timeline annually. And then he also manages the city's revaluation every 5 years. And then finally, on the tax collection side, collecting all of the taxes that John and his team assess, all of the daily, monthly, and annual reporting for taxes, and then we also enforce delinquent collections. Thanks, Julian. So a couple of the highlights for FY25. On the accounting and control side, we filed our ACFR. I know you guys love this book. Great reading for over the weekend, right? So we file that report annually every year. It's due by December 31st for the previous fiscal year. In addition to that, we have to file a federal and a state single audit, which is an audit of all of our grant revenues and expenditures here at the city, both federal and state. We've also, on the accounting side, managed the $112 million of the American Rescue Plan Act. We met the obligation deadline from the federal government for all $112 million, and we have filed all reports timely and will continue to do so. We also worked with the Treasury Department and implemented Pay Mode X, which is an online, an e-payables system, and it actually replaced an outdated e-payables system that we would issue like ghost credit cards to our vendors and then notify them as to what amount they could charge on those ghost credit cards based on invoices that were approved for payment in the AP cycle. On the procurement side, I mentioned earlier they had a couple of vacancies, right? So most of the work for procurement for FY25 came out of the supplier diversity unit. Augusta Joseph has taken over this unit. She has made such great strides with a lot of our smaller contractors. She ran a series of radio ads in 2023 that were quite successful. In FY25, she created the first supplier diversity newsletter, and she's been holding trainings on construction requirements with the vendors. On the risk side, we managed some OSHA violations at a few of our firehouses. We've cleared all cited issues, and the violations were closed at the state. The cost overall was around $130,000 that we paid out of the risk and safety funds, and then $250,000 in CIP funding. We use a software program called Gallagher Verify in the risk and safety department, and what that does is it captures all of the certificates, the COIs, the certificates of insurance that vendors have to provide to us to prove that they have the correct insurance requirements. We were noted that we were the Gallagher Verify's #1 client with the highest, with our highest compliance rate for them at 80%. So 80% of our vendors have the appropriate insurance for the work that they're doing for the city. And I just want to note that the other 20%, they're just sitting in a holding bucket, so they're not doing work without the appropriate requirements, but it just takes a little bit more work to get those requirements up to par. And then I mentioned earlier the safety program. So some of the trainings that we did on the risk and safety side was bloodborne pathogen training for DPW and HHS, asbestos awareness training, again, for Public Works and for the fire department, ladder safety training, and CPR and AED training. So we have some more trainings planned for the rest of 25 going into 26, hoping to expand on the safety program. And again, John filed his grand list by January 31st this year, so we are in compliance for the FY24 grand list, the grand list 2024 for fiscal year 2026. On the tax collection side, we got many complaints about the refund process or the overpayment process taking too long. Nancy and Kateria really put pen to paper and figured out a way to reduce the payment time on those overpayments or refunds from 12 weeks to 6 weeks. So they cut it in half. And the taxpayers are much more happier now to get their refunds quicker. We've increased cashier training in the tax collection side to reduce errors on the processing, because they do process a lot of tax dollars in that office. And again, we are continuing to focus a lot of energy on delinquent collections of personal property taxes. This category of taxes just continues to be the most difficult category to collect on. So we decided to recruit a second collection agency that would focus just on personal property with Nancy. So far, so good. Oh, I'm going backwards. Okay, strategic initiatives. These are straight out of the budget book. Not that we have a lot of leverage to grow the grand list, but we work with DDS and any department to try and grow that grand list and increase and diversify our tax revenues. We know that that's an issue here at the city, with 50% of our grand list being non-taxable, but we are trying to find any little crack in the cement that we can to increase those tax revenues as much as we can. Continuing to ensure that all financial transactions and reporting fall under generally accepted accounting principles and what we call GASB on the accounting side, which is our governmental accounting standards. So we are mandated for all reporting, especially related to the ACFR, to fall under both of those guidelines. Continuing to try and maximize the collection of current and delinquent taxes. Currently, we are meeting our budget for FY25, exceeding it in a couple of categories, and we expect to exceed budget by the end of fiscal 2025. And then continuing to work on the contract compliance monitoring and reporting for all construction and service-related contracts. So our FY 2026 recommended budget request is $4,727,000. So this represents a 7.4% increase over FY 25, or $327,000 increase. So I mentioned earlier on the org chart, there was an extra position at the top of the org chart. This budget includes a request for 2 new positions in the department, the first being in administration. As I mentioned earlier, I've been with the city for 19 years, and I do plan on retiring at the end of fiscal 2026. So in working with the mayor, we came up with a plan to start succession planning in the fall for my position. Obviously, as I said, 19 years, there's a lot of institutional knowledge that I need to pass on to the next generation. So this will give me the opportunity to work with the new finance director for about 9 months before I retire. The second position is an admin assistant position in the procurement unit, specifically in purchasing. So right now, the two buyers of the city and the purchasing agent do all of the admin work associated with RFPs. This position will take on a bulk of that admin work so that the buyers and the purchasing agent can focus on just straight purchasing, and they don't have to do the admin work associated with it. $103,000 of the increase is just straight contractual increases for the three unions. We have 1716, HPA, and HPA, all in the finance department, all with contractual increases. We have an $8,000 increase for our e-procurement software. So Michelle has been working really hard on finding a software that will better fit the needs of the city. And one of the biggest needs that we have is contract management. So Michelle was able to find a software package that allows for e-bidding or e-procurement, as well as contract management and some supplier diversity reporting, so that we can minimize the manual reporting associated with supplier diversity. This one, which is a little exciting for me, we have a $24,000 increase for the tax collector's office, and this $24,000 is for a tax payment kiosk. So it's basically a self-service kiosk where residents can go up to the machine and pay their taxes at any time of the night, any time of the day. They don't have to worry about the tax office hours, taking time out of their work schedule. They can do it at their convenience. The good thing is it's a standalone kiosk. We haven't quite figured out the location yet, but we want to put it in a prime location where folks maybe just don't have limited access to bus routes to get to City Hall, or we just need to isolate what that location is. And we do have the ability to move the machine if we pick a location that maybe isn't as active as we thought it would be. So it's similar to an ATM machine when you're making a deposit, and I believe it is in multiple languages. So as the resident walks up, they can choose the language that they'd like to make the transaction in. And then now I have to admit to a little boo-boo. So on the MRF line, under FY25 adopted budget, it says $30,000. It really was $43,000, and then it threw all the percentages off and the percentage of change and all of that, so those numbers are bad. But basically, it should have been $43,000 compared to $45,000 for a 4% change, which would change my overall budget to 6.4% increase. So moving on to highlights and areas that we want to focus on in 2026 is we've been, since the pandemic, just constantly focused on rebuilding and training the team, making sure that everybody is getting the appropriate training that they need to do their job, and maybe some training that would help them get to the next level up. So ensuring that we have constant training going on of the team. About 2 years ago, I implemented biennial training of just supervisors and managers within the department. So we focus on managerial issues in the department and what the best way is to approach those issues and how we should be talking to the staff, right? So we don't want to talk to them every day just on things that maybe they didn't do right. We want to talk to them about everything. We want to talk to them about their goals. Where do they want to be in 5 years? Do they want to be an admin clerk in the tax office, or maybe they want to be a finance director in the next 10 years? So working with where they want to be, what training they think they would like to have, and seeing if we can get on a shared path to move forward. Again, I need to focus on succession training. Unfortunately, it's not just me with a planned retirement. In 2026, we have our deputy tax assessor who will be retiring in October of this year. And then my lovely controller to my left who plans on retiring around the same time I do. So there will be a lot of transition in the department, and we just need to make sure that everybody has the knowledge that they need to move forward. One thing that's difficult for me is holding a full department-wide staff meeting. Each of the division heads will hold their own staff meetings, and I meet weekly with the division heads. I'll meet with the teams one-on-one if requested, but there's no meeting space in City Hall big enough to hold the entire finance department. The mayor's green room has a max capacity of 20 or 25 people. But luckily, with the library reopening next door, we're able to use some of their space. So late summer, early fall, we'll be holding our first full department-wide training and meeting, and we'll focus on some team building efforts during that time. On the tax collectors division, we are working now with the Department of Development Services on the next tax deed sale. We are looking to hold this tax deed sale probably in the fall, late fall, could even go early winter, but it will be early to mid FY2026 timeframe. And then this giant undertaking that procurement has finally started with Corporation Counsel on updating the procurement ordinance. Obviously, with times of inflation and the cost of materials going up, our procurement ordinance is a little outdated with some of the dollar thresholds, and we need to increase that so we can maximize performance in the procurement division and speed up some of the timing it takes to get requisitions in the city. And then on the accounting and control side, we've been doing a full lien review on the payroll processing. I tell you, this one's been a doozy. No one's looked at payroll since I've been with the city. And we're just taking it from ground up. We're looking at every single process in payroll, starting with the timekeepers, going all the way through to the last check going in the mailbox. So we're hoping to conclude that by the end of fiscal 25, but most likely it's going to drag into 2026, hoping to have it done by the end of calendar 2025. And then staff composition, we have 30% of our departments are residents. And then race ethnicity, we are 26% Hispanic, 37% African American, 30% Caucasian or white, 7% other. And then again, the females strongly dominate the finance department here, so we're 70% females and 30% males. And that is the end of my presentation. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ms. Rose. We're going to, but it's also on the screen is joining us Assistant Majority Leader T.J. Clark as well. What we're going to do this time around is that we're going to do one round of questions of 1 to 2 questions per council person, and then any other additional questions that we may have, we'll just send them, via email to the department head and also Julian, so that way we could get a response within a reasonable time frame. So I'm going to start from my left this time around. So I'll see if Councilman Mitchell, do you have any questions?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I have 2 very similar questions about different things, so I'm going to cheat and take 2. and then I have a suggestion. One is the $8,000 for software that you talked about. Is that a one-time expense, or is it a subscription, or is it some of both?
Yeah, so it's the $8,000 is the additional cost over what our current software cost is. So that is an annual increase.
An annual, okay. And the tax payment kiosk, similar question. You said $24,000. Some of that must be like the thing. How much of that, what is the recurring maintenance cost of that thing?
It's $24,000 annually per machine. So if we were to do 2 kiosks, it would be $48,000 every year.
And what is, I mean, I sort of understand the benefit in a basic sense. Like, I've had to come pay my car tax. I would like to do it quickly. Is there any, like, do we have information from other cities, or like, does it reduce costs in some important way, or increase payments, or, you know, sort of, do we have some concrete data on the benefits of it? We
do. So some of the benefits rely on reduced processing fees. It's advantageous for the taxpayer to pay at their own convenience. And then it is an increase in delinquent, collection of delinquent taxes.
So there's like, there will be a measurable increase in income.
Yes.
And
currently, some of the towns and cities are just starting to use these kiosks. It's been in use in the town of Manchester for a few years now. So, and they're seeing some success with it after some trials and tribulations with finding the right location. So we know that that is an issue that we'll have to work through.
And thank you for that. And my last note is that you said you are struggling to find places where your whole department can meet. 60 plus seats, mostly empty most of the day, just saying.
I have to mention, Councilman, these chairs on this end are not that comfortable.
It's a way to encourage quick meetings.
All right, Councilman Thomas, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say congratulations on a well done run for you and all the brothers and sisters that are planning to retire. I did have a question about the kiosks because I know location will probably be the biggest issue, or the thought process around it. It might be good to maybe hold at your staff meeting that you have, maybe have an old-fashioned vote and see if some people have some location ideas. And I think if it's not like a Herculean task to move, it might be good to move it quarterly or maybe twice a year between the top 4 locations or the top 2 locations. That's my only piece of things I can offer onto it. But I think it's really cool to have different ways that people can pay taxes, and it's just like us stepping into the future, which is something we got to do a lot more of. So thank you.
Thank you for the recommendation.
All right,
That's it, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Gale.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, everybody. On the procurement side, you discussed the monitoring the 15-30-15 requirements that are built into a lot of contracts. They're also built into a lot of tax fixing agreements. And if I'm not mistaken, there's some requirement that your department issue once a year a report on the tax fixing agreements and the compliance with those various tax fixing agreements. So I don't think we have that report, and I do remember seeing it at some point along the way. I don't know if I saw it last September, but
I actually have been holding on to that report for a minute, not because I don't want to share it with you, but it's a lot of information. And I've been working with Julian, because he does so many presentations, on trying to find a format that's more palatable, because right now the only format that I can really issue it in is electronic, because it's so much data. So I am more than happy to share it in its current format if that's helpful to you, but do know that we are looking to hopefully reformat it so that it's providing you the information that you need and you're not drowning in numbers.
Oh, no, I'm glad to hear that, because the one report I did see was, as you say, not easy to read. And I do think it's important information, because, council has been, over quite a few years now, we've entered into a lot of tax fixing agreements, and I think it's important for us and for the public to know whether the people who've been getting these agreements have been living up to the requirements, and how close have they come. So it would be extremely helpful for us to get the information, but I'm happy to wait unless you tell me it's 2027. I mean, if the new report's coming, within months, happy to wait on it, but appreciate that. Kind of along the same lines, you mentioned updating some of our ordinances. I kind of think that the tax fixing ordinance needs some updating. I believe that the requirements that are in the existing ordinance are not being met by anybody, not being required by anybody, do not represent the 15-30-15 that we are requiring. And I don't know if that's risen to anybody's radar to take a look at those ordinances or not. So you have a comment on that?
Yes.
You gotta pull it way closer.
Yes, Councilman Gale. Actually, that is the main reason why I'm working with Corporation Counsel, is that particular ordinance. It is particularly harder, more difficult to hold developers versus contractors, like under CIP contracts, like contracts that are paid out directly by the city under those ordinances. It's been harder to get them to comply without being able to hold them to any repercussion for non-compliance. We've had a lot of kickback from contractors, but again, it also comes from the outdated city ordinance. So it's major, it's huge. We've been talking about it for a couple years now, and Jonathan and I have been sitting together monthly to go over those ordinances to see what we can do so that we can hold the developers to their contract obligations.
Well, excellent. I wish you a lot of luck. And again, likewise, I hope it happens sooner rather than later. Second area that I'm wondering if you can discuss, it sounded from your presentation as though the Finance Department is already doing a number of things in conjunction with the Board of Education. But I know that there's been ongoing discussion over the years of trying to merge more functions, merge more board functions and city functions together to achieve some economies. And I'm just wondering where you think we are and what you're seeing the future may hold for the opportunity to achieve some efficiencies there.
So we haven't started that process. Julian and I have had some discussions. We met with HR and had some discussions around shared services, but we've kind of put the discussions on hold until the Blue Ribbon Commission finished their report, which they just issued about a month ago. So just allowing for Julian and I to get through the budget process, and then we plan on picking them up again and moving forward.
Okay, so nothing specific, just ongoing thinking about it, talking about it.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Council President? No, go ahead. I don't have. Okay. Well, say one thing. I was still formulating my question, but I will say one thing. This Gallagher thing actually works.
Yes.
I get that email all the time, even before the insurance expires. It's still like it's already sending emails. So every time I see it, I'm like, You just got to get it done. So
Yes.
it works. It's a great system. So, for vendors, it's really like you have to get it done because otherwise you're going to keep getting these emails every single time. So it's effective in that sense.
Thank you.
So the one question is the finance position, the finance director position, is the intent to maintain that position beyond FY26, or is it was just created only for these transition purposes?
My understanding is the CFO position will go away until the mayor determines who he wants to appoint to that position. And then the finance director position will take over. And I believe the funding from the CFO position would be used for the new finance director to recruit a deputy finance director so that they can be more continual succession planning from the beginning versus obviously waiting to the end of the tenure like I had to.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have right now. Council President?
Good evening again, everyone. Great presentation. I'm not going to do any of my questions. I'll put it in writing since today is your daughter Paige's 17th birthday, and we want you to get out of here to get in time for the birthday party. So
Thank you.
happy birthday, Paige. And so I am going to put my questions in writing so you can be out of here in the next 15 minutes.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Well, now I'm going to have to do the same thing.
You can ask.
No. First of all, I need to, director, team, thank you very much. And really, congratulations, well-deserved, everyone who's retiring, not me. I just need to make a comment, and then I have a question for page 11, but I'll send it to you. Kudos for managing, met and filed $112 million in ARPA funds. We know for a fact that did not happen in every municipality, let alone in this state, in this country. So thank you for doing that for us. And again, the 12 to 6 weeks, listening to constituents is what we do, and we'd like to think that's what we all do, and you did, and something happened for that. And questions, I'll send in an email. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just quick and easy questions. Thank you for the presentation. Congratulations to everyone who's retiring, and appreciate all your work. So just quick question on a tax payment kiosk. Does it do anything differently than online payment services? What is the term of the contract, and how many other towns and cities in Connecticut use this?
So it would probably do the same thing as online payments, but we know that a good chunk of our residents don't like the online technology. So it gives them another option beyond the online. One town that we know of so far, lots of conversations going around with other towns and cities, and I believe Eversource is getting ready to roll out their energy payment kiosks. We tried to do like a joint service connection with them, but it didn't work out. And we are looking at potentially doing a joint service with the tax payment kiosk with the town of East Hartford as part of both mayors' initiative. Other than that, did I miss something? $24,000 annually per kiosk.
And what is the term length of the contract?
1 year.
1 year, okay.
1 year.
Thank you.
There were two burning questions that were left behind, and so I'm going to ask one of them. The federal funding and the projection that I know you guys are constantly looking at that. Do you have any update on how we feel about the federal funding as of today?
Well, it's definitely unknown, right? So we had a stop payment or a junction, a what? Stop work order on 2 of our health grants. But then quickly, the state of Connecticut filed suit along with several other states, and then that was lifted. But I think this question I'll leave for Julian to answer since he manages the grants team. And as soon as I see anything, I call him anyway. So just to make sure that he answers the way.
So, in all fairness, we thought that you were going to defer to him. So we were like, okay, let's just ask just in case, right?
Oh, you set me up.
No, so there's one more question for the tax assessor. So I'll let Councilman Gale just put that out there that we forgot to ask. So, Councilman Gale?
Yeah, thank you. For the assessor, just wondering if you can give us some thoughts on what, looking ahead, we know there'll be reval 2026. We know that downtown properties, big commercial properties seem to have already lost a substantial amount of value, and I imagine that means there's going to be quite a tax shift from commercial onto more of our residential. I don't know what modeling you've done, and it may be that it would be totally speculative, but I do think it would be probably inappropriate for us not to at least ask the question and try to see what, so that we can plan to the degree, to the extent that anybody can plan for these things. And maybe in answering that question, you could also comment as to whether there are better ways of doing reval. I don't know if other states do their property tax rolls on an annual basis. I know in Connecticut, I think every municipality pretty much does it on a 5-year basis, but it does then give us these massive shifts that occur at times and create hardships. But anyway, what do you know?
I don't know much. I know whatever we think is true today will change significantly by October of 2026. Where I have been, I watch the sales on a daily basis, so I have a pretty good handle on what things are selling for and where how those sale prices relate to my current numbers. You're right. The big office buildings, they went down in value in 2021. But I think the full effects of COVID were not anywhere close to being understood at that time, and there were no sales whatsoever. There still haven't been any sales of office buildings, but we have not fared well in the courts. They all, of course, sued except for the headquarters. I didn't get any lawsuits from the insurance companies. But all of the major towers, the multi-tenant towers sued, and the courts are either the court awards them what I think is way too much, or we end up settling. So I'm hopeful that the drop in office values is, while it will be profound, I think it's going to be muted slightly by the fact that they're already pretty low in many cases. The residential properties, it does appear to me that sale price increases is kind of leveling off, but I don't see any hint of going down or anything like that. And right now, I think if I have $275,000 on a 3-family, it's liable to sell for more than $400,000 now. And I think that's true with all the residential types. I'm sorry, Councilman, I lost track of your question.
Well, modeling for us, whether there's going to be a shift in what properties would potentially see tax increases versus tax decreases. I think the office towers, as you mentioned, they may have already seen some tax decreases, so you're saying that potentially that might not be as severe as we thought.
It will be severe, because it's the top 10 taxpayers, their assessments are roughly 20% of the entire list. So I mean, their personal property is valued annually, so that our numbers are current on that, but the real estate is valued every 5 years, and that is big changes, and that just triggered what I had wanted to answer about your question that I'd lost track of, and I think other states I've worked in throughout New England, I've worked in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania on revaluations, and everybody does things a little bit differently. In many states, revalue every year. I think, when we used to revalue every 10 years, and that was seriously calamitous whenever any municipality did a revaluation. I think back in around 1996-ish, the state changed the law, and we went to a 4-year cycle, where the thinking was then every 12 years we'd go out and physically examine every property, and in the 4th and 8th years we'd basically take our existing data and update our valuation models to bring numbers current. I thought that was a pretty reasonable schedule. It never was given a chance because when the first round of revaluations following the law change was in the early 2000s, and there was a huge run-up in values then. So basically the state panicked and changed the schedule again, so now it's every 5 years. I think that's too long. I think every year is probably too frequently. I think every 2 or 3 years would be pretty ideal. And there is no reason we can't do that. We have to revalue by a certain date, but nothing says we can't revalue today if we wanted to. I will say that optional revaluations almost never go forward because and Windsor experimented with this a fair number of years ago now. And basically, they did the work, they updated the numbers, nobody liked the numbers or the effects, and they didn't have to do it, so I said, nah, we can do it when we're supposed to.
I think I would also add, John, that the revals are very costly.
Yeah, they are, but I mean, yes, that is true. I think if you do it more frequently, there's less change and there's less reaction, and the costly parts of the program would not be as complicated if you did it more frequently. But I mean, it would, again, I see little likelihood of choosing to do a revaluation when you don't have to, and who knows what goes on annually at the Capitol, and maybe it would change. This round, the 2024 jobs were pretty disruptive. The 2025 jobs are going to be quite disruptive, and ours for 2026. I really can't predict anything. It just on what's happened in the last few days. I mean, I think, we got a year and a half to go, almost 2 years. Who knows?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for your presentation. Sorry, one question. Quick, no, we're good. All right, well, Councilman
Mr. Chair.
Mitchell. Oh, yes. Well, Councilman Mitchell, go ahead.
Just following up on that, and also on something that was in the original presentation. One of the things in the presentation that Finance is working on is efforts to grow the grand list. What does that mean practically? Like, how do you? And I'm not saying this to call you out like you're not doing a good enough job. On the contrary, I sort of, it feels like like an impossible task. So what does it mean to try to grow the grand list for your office?
Yeah, it really is an impossible task. I think we are always scrubbing to see if there's anything out there that we missed. Is there any other way that we can find a different revenue stream, maybe in terms of a voluntary pilot or working out pilots with some organizations? So it's meaning that we never accept it as is, and we will continue to keep looking.
And again, this is not to draw out an answer that casts you in a bad light, but instead to
Absolutely.
emphasize the difficulty of this. In the best of circumstances, like how much, given that 50% of our taxable land is not taxable effectively, how much difference does that make in the city's finance if you all really like hit a home run on those efforts, practically speaking?
You know, there are years, correct me if I'm wrong, John, where the taxable percentage might drop to 48%, and it might be 51% taxable or 52% taxable, and it goes back and forth like that. So we'll take those 1 or 2% as a win.
But we're not like getting out of our structural hole
No,
with these
no,
efforts.
no.
Thank you. That's all. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Assistant Majority Leader Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since Councilman Mitchum took my question, I think I have to come up with another one. Thank you, Leanne, for your presentation, and kudos to your staff that's hardworking. Regarding tax collection, some years ago, the city used to allow taxpayers to pay their taxes quarterly. Now we do it biannually. Has there been any thought as to going back to quarterly?
Well, right now, if you are in the elderly program, you can pay quarterly, but that's the only group that is allowed to do so. We haven't had any recent discussions about allowing other taxpayers to pay quarterly, but it's something I think we are willing to do.
Do you know the history regarding switching from quarterly to biannually?
I do not.
Okay.
Kateria,
Neither do I. I just thought I'd ask the question. Maybe you did know.
No, most likely, I bet you Nancy, who's not with us tonight, does, but I can do some research and get back to you on that.
Okay, that'll be great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Rolls and your team for being here with us tonight and doing this great presentation and answering all these questions. Any additional questions will be sent via email. So thank you very much. We're going to take a 10-minute break before we transition to the next department. Thank you.
Thank you.
a mail car. Let's talk about our second presentation.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Now we have our Management and Budget, Office of Management, Budget and Grants office. And with us tonight, we have our director for this department, Julian Front. And Julian, the floor is yours. And before you begin, can you please introduce the team alongside with you tonight? Thank you.
Of course. Can you hear me okay? All right, terrific. Good evening, Council President Surgeon, Chairman Hernandez, and members of the council. We appreciate the opportunity to present our FY26 budget to you. The team assembled at the table here this evening, starting on my left, is Cheryl Horowitz, the Director of Central Grants Administration. To my immediate right is Jeff Halen, Assistant Budget Director. And to his right, David Beck is our other Assistant Budget Director. Can you please click to the first slide? This is the mission statement of the department. It has not changed since last year, and is primarily built around providing accurate financial forecasting and budget development, fiscal controls and operational analysis, all geared towards helping leadership and elected officials make informed decisions about the budget and our financial priorities. And we strive to maximize the leveraging of state, federal, and local grant opportunities to fund programs and services that will benefit the citizens of the city. Next slide, please. Our department is comprised of 4 units. We have budget development, which prepares the annual and recommended and adopted budgets, monitors revenues and expenditures throughout the year. We're responsible for all the monthly reporting, including reporting to the Municipal Accountability Review Board and preparing a 5-year budgetary forecast each year. In Central Grants Administration, this unit coordinates and oversees 3 HUD-funded programs. That's CDBG, ESG, and HOPWA. These are formula grants. The process involves soliciting proposals from community agencies and city departments, evaluating the proposals, developing an overall plan, and then holding public hearings on proposed plans, and then presenting to the City Council for approval, and then final implementation of those grant-funded programs. The Grants Office also collaborates with the administration and all of our departments in prospecting, identifying, and applying for other grants, evaluating opportunities for grants, assisting in the development of compliance reports, and in basically any phase of grant development they may get involved in a supportive role to other departments. In revenue management, we do invoicing and collections on a wide range of non-tax revenues. These include rentals of city-owned properties, pilot payments, collections for police private duty, collections for city services at special events, and the cannabis tax and others. And depending on the individual revenue source, the Revenue Office gets involved in either doing the invoicing in some cases, processing the payments, collecting the payments, booking them in the financial system, and pursuing collections on overdue accounts. And then in the 4th division is our graphics and mail division. This is the operations of the print shop, providing duplication services for city departments and managing the mail services. So we handle all the large print jobs, such as the printing of the budget document, and many large mailings, such as the tax bills and the registrar's voters canvass. We currently consist of 15 full-time positions. Of those, 12 are primarily supported through the general fund, and 3 are primarily supported through the CDBG grant. And we're also currently recruiting for what will be a new position of Community Project Coordinator. This position will be based in the Grants Office, working closely with the Mayor's Office and community partners to conduct needs assessments, identify priorities for grant acquisition, and aligning our overall grant efforts with the city's strategic priorities. Next slide, please. In the next slide, we have the beginning of some FY25 highlights. This slide is devoted to the grants management software. This project is an effort to develop our grant office's capacity to manage the grants process, all phases of the process, from prospecting through implementation and closeout. The funding to acquire this system was included in the current year's budget. We selected a software solution through an RFP process, and we selected eCivis, which is a solution created with the firm Una. And at this point, we have installed the software and developed the interface with the Munis financial system. All of the vendor-provided training to departments has been completed, and we're currently in the process of building out the actual database itself, which is a largely manual process, given that we're moving from no existing grants management system to this one. So we don't have an existing system to pull from. And when the database is built out, we will do some additional in-house end user training, and we are targeting July for a go live date. This snapshot, or the visual that I included on the screen, is just gives you a little insight into one of the benefits of having this, which is a greater reporting capacity. And you can just see that there's a drag and drop type interface to sort of select what kinds of grants you want included in a particular report, you know, based on funder or grant type, and then also being able to select which fields or characteristics of the grant you want reported in any report. So whether it's the funder, the amount, the grant term, the status of the grant. And so all of that will be far easier, very simple interface. But that's just one piece of this. There's a lot of functionality included in the system to assist in developing grant applications. There are workflow features that will allow for approvals electronically, and for generating compliance reports. So overall, it will be a huge improvement in efficiency for us, and in ensuring greater consistency in a lot of our procedures. Next slide, please. Then we have some additional highlights from FY25 here. I'll call out 3 of them. The first at the top of the list is we've fully staffed up to our 15. We did fill 2 vacancies this year, one in the grants office, and this was a really big deal for us to fill this senior project manager position. Angelique Crosdale is the new senior project manager. She actually comes to us from another department in Health and Human Services, and she's taking a big role in managing the HUD programs, so we're absolutely thrilled to have her on board. She started in February, and in January we filled a management analyst position in the budget office, a young man named Nat Bates, who is a quick study and learning very quickly, and we're super happy to have him on board as well. Secondly, I just want to point out that the team, once again, showed us that they're top performers and received the GFOA Budget Award for the second year in a row. And we look to submit again and continuously improve the document based on the feedback that we get from the reviewers. And then thirdly, I wanted to note that today, or either today or shortly after today, you will receive the proposed HUD program for next year based on the hard work of the Grants Office in assembling all of that information based on all of the applications that came through. You either have or will have shortly that plan in your inboxes. And that, I know, kicks off a whole process with the council as well to get through and approve for next year's HUD funding. And if you could move to the next one, please. Our strategic initiatives, just like with the Finance Office, these are taken directly out of the budget book and don't tend to change year over year. The one exception is the third bullet down, which is emphasizing our work and Cheryl's work with her team on, strengthening oversight of the HUD and other federal grant programs, ensuring that we're consistently in compliance and making these programs as sustainable and strong as possible. Next slide, please. This is the budget overview of OMBG department. You can see that as far as our general fund budget goes, 2.4% increase. This is attributable to the salary adjustments for our staff. On the grants line, the increase there, just as a reminder, in our grants tables in the budget, these are projections of spending. These are not anticipated award amounts. So this is what we are projecting as the outflow of grant funds in any given period. And so the projected grant spending is a function of spending down funds that we have in hand and a projected spend rate of funds for anticipated new awards to the extent that we're able to predict what they might be. And then could you go to the next one, please? Our highlights and areas of focus, on an ongoing business there, we will, continue to be, trying to provide leadership and the council with good budget information and helping to align budget decisions and our grant acquisition efforts with strategic priorities, continuing to ensure that budgetary decisions are equitable and implemented properly and consistently, continuing to ensure full compliance with all of our MARB requirements, continuing to receive and account for our non-tax revenues from other departments and programs and those that we actually collect directly, keeping up with our daily and monthly reconciliations, and pursuing delinquent non-tax collection, in managing the general fund budget with a goal of continuing to rebuild our fund balance. Specifically for FY26, amongst our priorities will be, as I mentioned before, going live with the grant software, providing technical assistance to the city and our community recipients of HUD funding to increase their programmatic capacity and compliance. So again, this relates to one of the objectives that we mentioned earlier in one of the previous slides. We will be looking for a new budget software solution, and I just want to point out that we have, I believe that the system, we currently use the Munis Financial System as sort of the primary tool for building the budget, but for building the documents and the tables and the exhibits in the way that they appear in the book, and for modeling future revenues and expenditures, we have been using something developed by this talented team in-house for probably 5 or 6 years. It's an Excel-based model. It's very sophisticated. It's very well developed, and it serves our purposes very well. But as as this team ages and we look towards the sustainability of a plan for future staffs as well, we will be looking for some commercial software that will be supported by a third party as well. And so we have looked at a couple of options and we'll be looking to make a decision on that and implement next year. We talked a little bit during the Finance Department presentation about working with the Board of Ed on some efficiency initiatives. Now that the Blue Ribbon Commission has concluded their report, we'll begin the process of working with the Board of Ed to identify where we can find some savings. And lastly, for the purposes of this slide anyway, we are looking at some efficiencies that could be achieved in the print shop through some software enhancements. We're looking at introducing a work order system and a software solution that will help us be more efficient in our mailing process. And then we'll go to the last slide, please. This is the breakdown of our department staff. 13% Hartford residents. You can see the breakdown for race and ethnicity there on the screen there, and we are 1/3 female, 2/3 male. And then just before I conclude, I'll just speak briefly to the question that was raised earlier during the finance section. There was a question about, that I think boiled down to what's the outlook for our federal grants and where do we see exposure. And I think it's helpful to break it down into some manageable pieces. So if we look first at grants that the city has already been awarded and has contracts for, even within that group, there's two subsets. So in some cases, there are grants that we have contracts for that we already have the funds in hand. We get the payments up front. So for example, the ARPA funds. Those funds we feel there's relatively minimal risk of there being any kind of clawback or anything like that. Specifically as it relates to ARPA, we've met all of the obligation requirements, all of the requirements for reporting compliance. We don't see any reason to think that those funds would be at risk based on what we see today. Then another category within grants that have already been awarded are grants that we don't have the funds in hand, but we do the work and then we submit for reimbursement from the funder through a drawdown process, either directly to the federal government, or in cases where it's a pass-through grant, we would be submitting drawdowns or invoices to a state agency as a pass-through. Those are the grants that were the subject of the memorandum that came out of the Federal Office of Management and Budget on January 25th. And that directive was telling federal agencies to pause on any distributions, and it was represented that those agencies were going to go through a process of determining which grants aligned with or did not align with a series of priorities and executive orders that had been issued by the White House. And it was very broad and sweeping in what it appeared to cover. There were immediately a number of court challenges to it. Within a day, the White House had rescinded the memorandum, and in any event, within a week or so, there were numerous cases, but there are at least two larger ones. One that was filed by the National Council of Nonprofits, and then another one that was a consortium of 22 or 23 state attorneys general that resulted in restraining orders against the withholding of funds. Since that point, or at least that is related to that directive, grant portals opened back up within a few days, and we haven't really seen a hiccup in being able to do drawdowns from any of our grants as a result of that. There have been other attempts to slow down or stop or withhold funds that we've seen. So for example, there was the attempt to withhold funds from the NIH and other sort of research universities in the public health realm by adjusting the formula for the administrative piece of a grant. And then also more recently, we saw, this was within the last week or so, the cancellation of a number of public health grants, and those were canceled on, the premise was that they were being canceled for cause. And the cause was that the funding was related to response to the pandemic, and that since the pandemic was over, there was no need for those grants. They took steps to cancel the contracts. The state's attorneys general turned around and sued, and a restraining order was put on that. So that's the grants that Leanne was referring to earlier. We got 2 stop work notices from the state of Connecticut for 2 public health grants. And then as a result of the restraining order, those funds should be flowing again. I don't think we've submitted for any reimbursement on those. This just all came down within the last week or so. But the restraining order says that those funds should continue to flow. So we're seeing these attempts to curtail distribution of grant funds for existing grants from a number of different directions. And fortunately, so far, the courts have resisted those or blocked most of those efforts. So that's for grants that we already have in hand. I think where there's even more exposure or more potential risk is in future grant awards, renewals of grants, and those are all going to be subject to the federal budgetary process and whether appropriations are going to be done at significantly lower levels. We've heard, Cheryl has heard in the community development world, there are expectations that HUD staffing is going to be cut in half, and we hear about other reductions in a number of programmatic areas. But it will be through the budget process and what Congress decides to do there. One thing that may give us a little insight into where there's greater risk is if you go back to the directive that came out back in January from the White House, the directions that went to the federal agencies to look for consistencies with White House priorities and executive orders. There was a list of 8 questions that agencies were directed to ask about each grant program in assessing their alignment with White House priorities. And I think those 8 questions probably give us an idea of where we should expect there to be some risk. So I'm just going to give you sort of the essence of those 8 questions. So the first one had to do with whether or not the funding in any way involved supporting directly or indirectly illegal aliens. The second question asked about whether the funding provided any type of foreign assistance. The third question asked about whether the funding involved elements of the climate finance plan, the international climate finance plan. The fourth area asked about whether or not the funds would have any impact on, to use the term in the document here, domestic energy resources, including funding through the Inflation Reduction Act or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The fifth area asked if it had anything to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. The sixth area asked if it had anything to do with promoting gender ideology. The seventh had to do with whether the programs supported or promoted in any way abortion. And the last, the last looks like it was more of a technical type question and not sort of issue-based. But I think it gives you an idea of sort of what direction, you know, at least from the executive branch, what their disposition on a number of grant programs would be. So it doesn't answer the question, what's the outlook, but for me anyway, it helps kind of like frame where the pressure is going to be coming from, and where, you know, what we should be looking out for. But anyway, that concludes our overview of the budget. Thank you. We're ready for questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. We're going to start from my right side and see if there's any questions from my colleagues. Councilwoman Bilodeau?
Thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you for all the work you all do. Just a question on the new position of Community Projects Coordinator. What are the responsibilities of that person? And I see that it's funded by remaining ARPA funds, so how does that position continue after those funds are expended?
So answer the second part first. That position would be moved into the general fund once we have expended all the ARPA funds. So that would be mid FY27. I can get you a copy of the job description, but it will generally be, you know, at a high level, working with community partners to do needs assessments, and working to come up with potential grant solutions where gaps and needs are identified, and you know, working to align our grant acquisition efforts with where the high priorities of the organization are.
Thank you so much, and I would appreciate if you shared that. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Majority Leader Rossetti.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you. Thank you for that thoroughly depressing last 7 points. But we have to be aware. We have to be aware. So it's kind of funny. I was looking at strategic initiatives. I was going to ask about how we aggressively pursue grant opportunities, but maybe I'll skip to the next one. And you know, the fifth bullet talks about maximize collection, private duty, special events, use of city property. A couple of things. How do we maximize the collection? How could we do it better? And is it really, is it worse, better, or about the same that it's been? That's like a three-parter.
We have, currently, our revenue collection is a one-person shop. What we have focused on this last year has been to develop some routines and consistency in sort of pursuing and staying on top of our receivables. Not that our the revenue collection specialist was not consistent prior to that, but for a period of time, and I want to say it was between 1.5 years to 2 years, she was also serving as a backup to the risk management function when there was a vacancy there, and then at times she was also backing up our office administration. So over the last year has been really her first opportunity to focus. You know, she still supports other departments as needed, but first year in quite a while that she's been able to focus really on the revenue collection process. So it's given her an opportunity to make sure that she's doing consistent monthly statements to all of our vendors or all of our, anyone that we've invoiced, setting up a consistent process for, after a certain, we picked a threshold of 90 days, for example, for private duty that, we do monthly statements. At 90 days, it becomes either prepay or no service, and then at the 120-day mark, being sent to collections. So just establishing some of those more routine and consistent processes there will help, rather than less consistency and being pulled away to do something for another department. And so there's that. We've begun to dig into the processes for some of the other, I think I mentioned when I was doing the overview that the revenue office in some instances is involved with the collection from the point of invoicing all the way to the point of posting and even in follow-up on delinquent payments. And then in other revenue streams, we may be only involved in like one or two of those parts of the process. So we're looking at each of the revenue streams to see which ones would be more suitable to just bring in and do from her office. If at some point it requires that we add a position or a half a position or something like that, I'll recommend it at the time, and I wouldn't recommend it unless we knew it was going to be offset by as much or more revenues. But we're just looking at the processes now with some of these other processes that are a little more fragmented in the way they're implemented.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So are you saying the possibility that another position could offset the revenue that it could bring in?
I'm just saying that as an example, that if the revenue supported it, I might recommend it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Madam President?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. After listening to such a depressing presentation of what was going to happen in the future, one of the things I did was I went back and took a look in the grants part of the budget, and there's like $181 million. How do we know we may not get $181 million after knowing that some of these funds may be cut back? And you use some of those funds to balance some of the department, what departments do. So are we going to, in the next fiscal year, try to figure out what we're getting, what we did not get, and maybe revise that $141 million?
Right. Well, we're in many respects, we're constantly revising those numbers. The grants, of course, are much more fluid than the general fund budget, which is a set amount on a date certain, July 1 through June 30th, whereas the grants all operate with different fiscal periods. Some start July and elsewhere, and some are multi-year, some are not. And so I started to lose the train of my thought. The projections that are in there, just as a reminder, the projections are projected spend rates. So it is a combination of projecting the spending down of grants that we already have and making assumptions about recurring grants and what we're likely to see based on past history. And so that's really the flaw in our projections, right? Is if we're basing them on past history. We don't have anything else to work from at this point. Making projections based on past history of what the spend down rate would be. And we tend to only include recurring grants in those projections, not, competitive. That would be a little bit more speculative, but you're correct in pointing out that it's all speculative at this point. And so I wanted to react to one other part of the question where you said that we use the grants to balance our budgets. And it's true that grants make up a very significant portion of our operations and funding the things that we do. The areas where grants are supporting actual positions are fewer. You know, the grant-funded positions are a subset of the overall grants. So we can identify where the grants would have an impact on FTEs. And then from there, you know, based on what we talked about earlier, when I was trying to highlight what looked to be the areas of greatest risk, we can identify where the greatest risk is as it relates to, you know, the core departmental functions.
I'm just staying with the grants. When I took a look at, you know, all the monies that are, the ARP funds are pretty much, you know, coming to an end now. By, I think, 2026, everything
December
has to be
31st,
spent.
correct.
Yeah, and so when I took a look at it, you know, we have about 2 or 3 more million to be spent in ARP funds.
I would have to dig through those to see what I...
And it's a little bit more.
Okay.
And then I'm also going to talk about CDBG, because, I mean, I know you're looking at projected, we don't know, you know, forecasting. You also said that the program time changed this year. So could you explain a little bit more? Because I know we had to do a little juggling, you know, to try to get the CDBG. We don't know how much you're going to be getting. It's projected. So could you explain a little bit of what's been going on with that?
Sure. Did you want to jump into that? Okay, yeah. I'm going to let Cheryl has more of the details on the timeline and the projections on that, so I'll let her go.
So first of all, this year is slightly different than the last 5 years because it is the start of the consolidated plan, which is for 5 years. So there's a big planning component to it. It's much more intensive. It takes a lot more time. There's a lot more of what Julian was talking about before about this new position that we're going to get to do needs assessment and to really understand what's going on in the community. So it appeared as if there was a lot more activity going on earlier. But one of the things is that we have a consultant that is working with us, and she just reminded me really that for the last 5 years, partly because we were in the middle of a pandemic for some of them, that the timeline of the way we were doing the HUD grants was really skewed to taking longer because there were a lot of unknowns. There was the shift from doing things in person to doing things online and all that. But in reality, May 15th is the deadline for when we are expected nationally to send in what our projections are for what we want to do for the next year. And part of this, part of the connection with that May 15th date is we all have talked in this setting about the delays that have happened in getting our programs started. That we talk about having a July 1st date to start the programs, and yet we're only approving fundings, allocations, June 30th, or even the beginning of June, and yet we're expected to start those programs going. Well, that's really unrealistic, and HUD never expected us to really do that, because they take 45 days, it's in statute, that they have 45 days from the date that you submit your plan for what you want to do, which includes those allocations, and their acceptance of that and their granting of our funds to start work. And so we have always kind of accepted the fact that this thing didn't come till later, the funds actually weren't there right away, but part of that is because we never abided by that May 15th deadline. And so now we're doing it because we're expected to do it. It's the worst year possible because we don't have any idea, really, of what our funding is going to be. We have been told multiply different things, like every third week. So the latest thing that we have heard is that the country will be flat funded. That is to say that CDBG will get approximately the same amount of money as it has gotten in the prior years. But the question is whether or not the Northeast and Hartford will actually receive that proportion that we have gotten in years past. And so we can't assume, and if we look at the trend of things that have been going on, I don't have high expectations. So we built in to this plan a 3% cut. It could be larger than that, could be not. Every week we hear something different about each and every program. So the last thing that I actually heard was that this year would be flat funded for CDBG and home, but that the year after this, they're talking about eliminating both of those programs. It's just talk. There's nothing really behind it, but this is what influences people's thinking and planning and what they're trying to do. So we're just doing one step in front of another, and we're proceeding as if this is going to happen. We're trying to look our best, get the programs in as quickly as possible, and put it before and find out. It is very possible that by statute, not only is that May 15th deadline there to get it in, but there's a May 1st deadline that the federal government is expected to make those allocations, that they will be in violation of federal statute if they do not do that. However, the word on the street is that they're not going to get it. But we're going to operate as if that will happen, and then everything will go forward as planned, and we will be in a much better position to get the CDBG program in particular up and running and implemented, and people getting their money when it comes faster.
The only reason I asked that because I thought you said that CBG is going to be just flat funded, but in the budget book there's a little bit, I think it's a 3% increase projected, no?
So the figures in the projected expenditures would reflect a combination of prior year awards. So we get an award, it's spent down over a number of years, then the next year.
So yes,
So it's sort of a cascading, so the timing will change from year to year as we kind of take a fresh look at where we are with spending down prior year's awards and what we're expecting for next year. So if you see a number go up in a given year in the tables, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're projecting a larger award. It's just a function of the timing of spending down awards that we have in hand.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was my first question. Right? I had that theory that it was carryover funding from prior years. I'll ask this not as I want to see this, but more about can this be done and if there's any value to it. And I only ask this question because I do it personally at my job. I do this carryover column, right, where you have the base funding and then you actually show the carryover and then the total. I know we're adding more columns, right, and this becomes becomes like a bigger document, if you were to do that. But the reason that I bring that up is because when we look at this book and we see this CDBG, for example, showing that it's projected to be higher next year. And the first thing that I saw when I saw this, I was like, wow, in this federal ecosystem, we're projecting higher, which is counter to what I thought I was going to see. And then I said, okay, it could be carryover funding. However, it does send a false message, right, to the program and to the folks running the programs that there's more money, that there's more money to tap into, and And because it doesn't show that it's not really that there's more money, the base funding is either the same or lower. This is just carryover funding that's already been previously allocated. So the messaging, without you explaining this, it would be the wrong message, right? Because it's sending that signal that, hey, it's more money, but in reality it's not. So if there's an opportunity, and whether it's in this book or in any other way to actually show carryover funding, or even if you put an asterisk and at the bottom it says, carryover funding was included in this figure, then at least, that will help. It will help a lot. So that's my one comment. The other question that I had was, so ARPA funding. We've seen already around the nation how the federal government has, with absolutely barely any reasons or just simply overnight, pulled back some ARPA funding that has already been allocated, and they just simply pull it back. You're not getting it anymore, and that's the end of it. With ARPA funding that we have here, substantial amount of ARPA funding across this budget book, do we have a plan B or plan C or plan D to mitigate any potential pullback of funding from the federal government, whether it's ARPA or any other funding? Are we in real time keeping an eye on it and building a plan to figure out how to mitigate that in real time, as opposed to now during the budget season, right, that you are being conservative and you're saying, okay, you know what, we think we're going to get less here, less there, and I know that throughout the process you've been doing that, and that's extremely hard to do. But in real time, are we ready to react to something like that?
I think the risk that you pointed out, we're mitigating the risk by being in full compliance with all the requirements, because my understanding is that the threat of clawback, as it came through, we received a letter, I want to say it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, that the threat is coming from a compliance angle, and that for the federal government was going to take a close look at who had not really obligated their funds by December 31st and who were somehow misrepresenting that they had obligated the funds. And we are, so the first response is that we mitigate the risk by being in full compliance. I mean, the finance department is really on top of all of this and all of the reporting requirements. The remaining funds, and I will get the number to you, the remaining funds are relatively minor in terms of as a percentage of the total original award. So we're really talking about winding down. We're not heavily dependent on a lot of the funds that are left. As far as the funds that are being used to support positions, we have built into our multi-year planning, bringing positions back into the general fund as needed. You'll see in 1 or 2 places in the budget this year that we've taken a currently ARPA funded position and brought it into the general fund. So we have, our plan is to wind down, but I can't say that we have a specific contingency plan if the federal government came in and was like clawing back funds that we already have in hand.
Thank you. And my last question is, when you mentioned to be in compliance, which, by the way, those, how many? I think it's about eight things that you mentioned, 8 or 9 things that you mentioned that the federal government is looking at, whether it's DEI, climate change, all these things. Those are very difficult things to make sure that we're in compliance with, because of the scope and how the interpretation for each of them can be massive. But does that include also federal funding that has been allocated to other organizations, whether they are nonprofit organizations or any other partner organizations throughout the city? Does that compliance also is being reviewed to that level, not just the federal funding that we are spending as a city, but also the pass-through to other organizations? Does that review goes all the way that far?
So my understanding of that, this is, again, those 8, that list of 8 items was specific to the directive that came out in January that said we're going to pause funding. And So my understanding of that directive was that they were looking at all federal grants. Now that that directive or that memo has been blocked by the courts, I don't know to what extent the agencies are going through and continuing to, evaluate every grant program in that context. I don't really know how that list is playing into their current planning, other than I saw it as a little bit of a peek inside to what sort of values were driving the administration in that decision to do that.
Okay, so lastly, just to follow up, even if we remove that memo, even if we remove those components,
Yeah.
are we doing compliance review to pass through funding that leaves, this office and goes to nonprofits or any other partnership organizations? Are we doing those reviews in a timely manner in order to pinpoint whether there is a red flag or there are some items that, regardless of this memo, just regular compliance, that's part of the regular, requirements of the funding? Are we doing that enough that we're comfortable that all of the funding that we're passing through is being utilized properly by the funder that's receiving the funds?
We always do that with our subrecipients, and do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, and that is one of our main functions in our department, is the compliance piece. We get into a lot of trouble sometimes because the regulations change all the time, and so we're said, well, we never had to do that before, but we try very hard to communicate to all of our subrecipients what the regulations are and what they're responsible for, and sometimes it involves not giving them the monies that were awarded to them until they are in compliance. There's a lot of variability as far as people kind of accepting those compliance regulations. We are always advocating for them. It's very hard, actually, coming to council many times with knowledge about particular groups that we are funding and knowing that they could be putting us at risk and themselves at risk of not getting additional funding because of their lack of desire to be, to take compliance seriously. But we do, and we try our very best constantly to do that. And also, one of the things that Julian put into the slides was a line about that we had taken $100,000 of our administrative monies that we get for running HUD to put into providing TA to both internal departments at the city as well as our subrecipients, so that we could educate and inform and assist them with being compliant.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councilman Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation, during which you mentioned that one of the functions of the office is to attempt to build fund balances. And looking at page 514 of the budget book, I believe that this is the statement in the book of where our fund balances were at the beginning of the year and where they are at the end of the year. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears as though during the course of the last fiscal year ended June 30th, 2024, we lost about $20 million in fund balance. So I'm wondering if you can give us an idea of what were the components of that loss, and then make a prediction as to the upcoming year. Will we see continued drop in fund balance, or hold the same, or modest increase, if you know?
So this exhibit comes directly out of the ACFR, and what you have here is all of the governmental funds displayed on one page, and as you pointed out, the overall governmental fund balance declined by 20 million. That is essentially driven by the capital improvement fund. I'll come back to that. But with the general fund, which is where we have our rainy day fund, you'll see that overall the fund balance increased by 14 million.
Where's that number?
And that is in on that page that you cited, 514, the column on the left is the general fund balance.
Got it. So 73,
Yes,
73 million is the general fund balance at the end of the year.
correct.
Thank you. And the second part of the question was prediction for this year, is there?
So on the, in the executive summary, we do have a graphic in there that projects where fund balance would land, assuming a pretty conservative forecast of increasing our unassigned fund balance by $5 million, which has been the administration's policy for the last probably 5 or 6 years, has been that a minimum of $5 million out of the annual surplus would go to the unassigned fund balance. And we're confident that we will exceed that number. But for projection purposes here on page 2-9, we show the projected unassigned fund balance on a percentage basis. And then on page 2-10, we have unassigned fund balance and total fund balance in terms of dollars. So you can see, sorry about that, in terms of, we talk about the fund balance or unassigned fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. The city has a policy that has a target unassigned fund balance of 7.5% as of the end of June, as of the end of FY24, so June 30th, 24, unassigned fund balance had reached 7%, so just shy, or by short of the target by 0.5%. And if we increase, if our unassigned fund balance goes up by the projected amount in the current year, we will have reached and slightly exceeded that target. So that's our forecast there.
Is that target amount that you mentioned the amount that's necessary to have a bond rating that would allow us to borrow money at a competitive rate, competitive with other municipalities?
The target is a city policy, and I don't know if it's the policy is in the back of the book. There's a section that has all our financial policies. I would have to look into whether or not that's a council-adopted policy or if that's something set administratively. I'm not certain, but that's the city's policy is 7.5%. The rating agencies don't have a specific number. There's a lot that goes into their formula for determining the bond rating. I think reaching your locally established policy or target is a positive. Larger is better than smaller, obviously. So I think 7.5% is definitely a very respectable fund balance percentage. I think last year we might have provided, and we can do it again, we had, in response to a question, I think we provided some benchmarking of other municipalities, so we can do that again. You can kind of see where, yeah.
That would be great, thank you. Staying with the budget book on page 19.3 in your portion of it, there's a beautiful graph here, but I don't understand what it means. So this is the number of operating departments managing within general fund expenditure appropriations. Could you just explain what each of these numbered bar graphs mean?
It's the number of departments that ends the year within their budgetary appropriation. So how many departments ended up on budget or less?
Well, how many do we have?
24. 24.
So,
Last year,
so the year that says estimated 24, that would be 100% compliance, or 100% within their,
yes.
and 23 is not 100%, it's 23 out of 24.
Right, so last year, in the final council transfers, in the end-of-year transfers that the council makes, there was one department, the Emergency Services and Telecommunications, had an overrun of $60,000 as a result of overtime. And so the part of your end-of-year transfers made a transfer to cover that. And so that's the one department there. The 17 for FY25 is based on our period 5 or period 6 report to the MARB. And what we do in those reports is we are very conservative on our projections. And at the beginning of the year, we routinely are showing budgets that will exceed their appropriations. And then over the course of the year, we see that number coming down as we recognize our vacancy savings. So what happens is we project out based on a fully accelerated spend down of the budget without taking into consideration projected vacancy savings. And we don't only recognize the vacancy savings as we realize them month by month. So over the course of the year, if you follow the MARB reports, you'll see this. The number of departments falling within budget increases, and those that are projecting an overage are decreasing. So that large, what appears to be a large number of departments that would end up going over budget is, based on one of those early reports. We just use whatever the most recent report to the MARB was at the time we put the buck together, so that it ties to something. If there is a department at year end that by June we're projecting is going to exceed its budget, then it becomes part of the council's end of year actions. So for example, we might have, the fire department this year is running high in overtime compared to budget. They may be a candidate at the end of the year. If we have not closed that gap, we'd come back and fix that through the transfers.
Understood, thank you. Last comment on page 19.5, where you note, and you talked about the revenue management, one employee, and the book indicates that one employee can take credit for bringing $108 million into the city, is one reading of this, so kudos to whoever that is. That's clearly the most efficient employee in the city of Hartford.
That revenue includes a considerable amount of state aid that she receives and processes. So some of those dollars aren't as heavy a lift as some of the other dollars.
Wow.
Thank you.
I have to say, I read it the same way, and I was excited about that employee. Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, and thank you for both the presentation and the thorough responses to our questions. I just want to follow up a little on what a couple of my colleagues were asking about the clawbacks from the federal government. You were talking about sort of being very diligent about being in compliance to avoid clawbacks. My sense, both from what you've said and from reading the news, is that that's just sort of like your best bet about the way to avoid what is potentially sort of a wild and arbitrary procedure. So I'm just trying to understand that better. Those clawbacks for non-compliance, how often did those happen before this year, in your experience? To us, to the city?
Oh, are there examples of actually being clawed back?
Yeah, we actually, I have been involved peripherally, but I play this administrative role sometimes. Yeah.
Can you work
and,
a little closer to the,
And
yeah.
so, for an HHS grant, it happened to be a minority health grant, and there were just staffing problems. And over the course of the time, and I was really struck by this actually, because it was after the pandemic, but not, not as far out as we are now. And their grant officers work very closely with the grantees, and they would have monthly, if not even more frequent, phone calls, and people would be on it. And there was a staff person who was a key person on that grant, and that person left, and leaving a hole that needed to be corrected because of the nature of that person's role on that grant, left a lot of work not being done for a period of time, and they were watching this. And so I was on a call where they actually said that they gave us a timeline, that, a time frame, and said, if you can't get a person in this role to do this grant, we're taking that money back completely. And then people got to work. They found a person in that role, and that person functioned, and everything was good after that.
But I guess what I'm saying is, like,
How often is that?
how often is that like, can you
Yeah.
think of many examples like that? I'm trying to understand, like,
Well,
how
not-
different is now from before
Yeah.
in terms of the feds?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yes, clearly it is. I thought it was unusual on that grant. I felt that they were being really very overly closely monitoring that grant. So I did think at the time it was unusual. It probably wouldn't be now, but it's more arbitrary now. And I do want to say that I have been in situations, and we have been on calls in the last couple of weeks, where a grant, a note comes down from, some generic portal that says, you're out of compliance on this grant, you've drawn this amount, there's this much left, we want it back. And at one point, the director who was in charge of that grant kind of reached out and said, do I have to give the money back? And we read it more closely, and it turned out that what they were saying is, if you're not using this money, give it back. And so I just said, you just need to write to them and tell them that even though this was kind of a draw towards the end and the grant is full, that you have full intentions of using the rest of that grant, and you have, and you can explain why and how, and apparently she did it. I don't know, have you heard back from? Yeah, I don't know exactly what but it seemed like she was pleased with that result, and that it must have somehow quelled whatever the storm was that was happening. But I do think it's, so it's happening. It's probably happening more. I think you have to be savvy, and really understand the culture and the landscape of grants to know how to react to a lot of those and what your, rights are, essentially.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for this presentation. And on behalf of council, congratulations on receiving that GFOA award. It sounds like a very fancy award, so congratulations.
Thank you.
And that concludes our budget presentation for tonight. For those watching us through HPA-TV, we will be reconvening tomorrow at 5:30, where we will be having budget presentations for Hartford Fire Department and the Emergency Service and Telecommunications Department. So thank you all. This meeting is now adjourned.